Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Today is the 4th of December 2025. This is a meeting of the Northampton Police Fire and Crime Panel at West Northamptonshire Council Headquarters, Angel Square. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Note we've got some speakers registered under item 2 of the agenda to speak, and a populated public gallery, which is always good and very welcome. Well, there's a reasonable agenda today. The meeting is scheduled to go on to at latest 4 o'clock. I'm conscious some members have indicated they need to leave at a certain time. I think we're looking at about 2 hours. But obviously, get everything done and hear as much as we need to from members and contributors. So I will read apologies first, unless you do, James. I'll take the apologies. Non-attendance today, Councillor Emily Fedorovitz from North Northampton Council, substituted by James Towns. Thank you, James. Councillor Barbara Jenny, North Northampton Council. I've no substitute advice. I don't know if... Because you couldn't make it either. Oh, okay, thank you, Dan. Sarah Hall, our Director of Governance and Monitor Officer, is substituted by Nikki to my left. And that's it for the moment. I'm not aware of any others. Going on to item 2 of the agenda, the requests to address the panel on agenda item 7, deliver the PFCC's public safety plan, have been received of a Mr. Simon Tilley in the public gallery, and Ms. Amy Fuzzard, I believe, is a student, and welcome. It's always good to have student interest in democracy. We're very, very happy to have you. And I'll just take some advice on James 1 second. Okay, and you'll be introduced as speakers prior to the item 7 before the report is read. Item 3 today, declarations of interest. Do any members or officers present have any declaration of interest pertaining to anything to do with the substantive agenda today? That's a no, thank you. Okay, Chair's announcements. So last week we had an extraordinary meeting this panel held in this place with a verbal response from the Commissioner with regards to the hearing and appeal relating to the judgment pertaining to the Chief Constable. So I'm going to read a statement out for clarification as part 1, and I have something else to say afterwards. So on advice of our monitoring officer, at the last meeting of the panel, references were made to the Chief Constable being convicted of contempt of court. The court's findings is of a civil and not criminal contempt against the Chief Constable, a corporation sole who is responsible for the acts or omissions of his employees and agents and of those under his direction of control. The finding of civil contempt of court on the part of the Chief Constable does not amount to a conviction, which is a term applied in criminal proceedings. So a point of clarity there for all members, if anything, if this does indeed raise its case in the future. Secondly, for a point of clarity, because I'm aware of members and members of the press who have made representation to the council and our communications team for a response regarding the public speaking of Miss Nadine Buzzard-Quashie, the witness in the Chief Constable case with Northamptonshire Police. Miss Buzzard-Quashie made a request to speak at this meeting, but prior to a response being given, withdrew her request to speak at this meeting today. So she was not refused by myself as the chair or any officers the opportunity to present. So I'd just like to put that on the public record for clarity. As always, we do take public speakers where possible. Commissioner Stone, you're raising your hand?
Sorry, not to do with that. Sorry.
Okay. So just to put that on the record, there was no refusal for Miss Buzzard-Quashie to speak at this panel today, and nor in the past either. Okay. Commissioner Stone?
Thank you, Chair. At the extraordinary meeting, I gave 2 bits of information that I said I would come back with because I just wanted to be really clear about the facts. So one was in relation to the survey of young people. So the number there I suggested was 2,000, but actually it was 2,431, just for clarity. And I did refer to the Chief's time in the Met. So I've got those dates for you. It's 2016 to 2022.
Thank you very much, most appreciated. And we'll note that for the minutes. Thank you, Danielle. Okay, so item number 5 today's agenda, to agree the minutes of the panel meeting on the 18th of September. No amendments have been notified in advance. I'll invite the panel to agree the minutes for accuracy, subject to any corrections you might wish to raise. Any reason why I would not otherwise sign the minutes? Thank you. Thanks, Ruth. Thank you, James. Okay, and we'll move on to today's formal agenda. Item number 6, which is the police governance reform. James, to my right, our Democratic Services Assistant and Panel Secretariat, will introduce the item. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is really intended to formally highlight, in a sense, to the panel the recent government announcement regarding changes in police governance arrangements, which, as members will no doubt be aware by this point, involve police crime commissioners and panels being abolished in 2028. So it seemed appropriate to bring this formally to the panel. There's the opportunity for the panel to discuss it as far as it wishes to do so at this point, perhaps as far as it's able to do so at this point, because the announcement so far is very much at headline level with details of proposed future arrangements to follow.
Thank you, James. Does anyone of the panel wish to comment or make any points at this time? Danielle?
No.
Okay, all good.
Chair, just one thing. Northamptonshire and Staffordshire are two authorities, police authorities, where they're likely to have two transitions, one into the local authority and one into a mayoralty. We know transitions are very expensive and very time-consuming. So I have challenged that with the policing minister because, you know, one transition would be okay. I think one of the problems we've got is that there isn't a plan for a mayoralty for Northamptonshire. And I'm really quite worried about that because I think in the long term, let's hope it's not too long, that means we'll be missing out on quite a lot of money. So I just wondered if the local authorities are getting together with partners to bring forward a plan.
I'll reply, Caroline, first, if that's okay.
Thank you. So my observation really was about the fire element of it, when I was looking at this, to be fair, and that is the fact that the council assigned across the fire responsibility to the Commissioner's office, and it's a couple of years ago now, I think. I can't remember the exact date. So when this hits, I mean, one of the questions we need to be asking back is what happens to the fire element? Because we're talking about the police, but we've got the police and fire commission, so we've got to consider how they're going to transition as well, and are they going to transition back to the council? Where are they going to transition to? So I think there's just questions to just put there, Chair, just as this starts to unpack a little bit more for us, because we've got that added complication of the fire. That's just to make a point. Thank you.
Yep. Councillor Keeble.
Thank you. I was actually going to bring this up under the work programme because it seems to me that it would be quite sensible to do some scoping work then, so that we get a bit of a timetable for the different elements and how that can look, to make sure that both the staff at the PFCC office who will find themselves looking for new jobs get as much security and management as is possible, and also that we can also look in quite what I suspect will be a very changing local government environment as to how the oversight function best operates. But it's clearly going to be complex, and I think we need to be sort of sighted on the planning for it, and we can put that into the work programme.
Thanks, Councillor Keeble. We'll go to Councillor Morris, then Johnny's raised his hand as well.
Thank you, Chair. I was just looking at the papers for the public bundle, actually. If you looked at page 18, the second but last paragraph on Sarah Jones MP report, talks about the white paper coming over the coming weeks, arriving. So there's no deadline for that. I attended, as some all know, the National Association of Police Fire and Crime Panels on behalf of Mark, who was at a private event that he couldn't avoid. So that was on the 26th of November. And to be frank, most of the people that perform this role across the United Kingdom are perplexed, and there's a lot of head scratching going on as to what's likely to unfold. And the response effectively was that nobody really knows at the moment. We have to wait. It's very frustrating for everybody, especially those that are likely to lose jobs. So we all absolutely appreciate that and get it. But as I say, the national chairs were saying that it's incredibly frustrating. And it was mentioned in several pages of notes, the same theme really. The sooner we know, the better, the sooner we can plan. And I really generally think what Councillor Keeble's mentioned there, the scoping piece is really important. So we've got to get that rolling as quickly as possible. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. Johnny?
Thanks. So as the head of paid staff for the Commissioner's Office, I've obviously taken this very seriously and I'm very close to the work. A couple of points of clarification. One is that the current plan is that all functions of Commissioners' offices continue and transition into new arrangements under these boards. So there isn't inherently a staff impact, but obviously the change is a staff impact in itself, and it may, the uncertainty may carry risks there as well. But I just wanted to clarify that there isn't a sense that the work stops. It's the function, the governance function that changes with the end of panels and of police, fire and crime commissioner roles within that. The savings package is tiny from government, 20 million per year nationally, which is a drop in the ocean. That again would support the idea that there isn't major staffing cuts anticipated. However, the whole plan to switch models wasn't public knowledge or even apparently very well known in government as a plan until the last minute. So I'm not counting my chickens. However, Danielle and I are both getting very involved in the national transition work in our roles, both as part of APACE, which is the Chief Exec's organisation, where I'm Vice Chair, and as part of the Commissioners Association, APCC, where Danielle holds a number of really key portfolios, including fire. The transition structure looks like a 10-project programme of work coming out of the Home Office, which we are going to be involved in throughout. I think, given that there isn't any talk of transition funding at this point, the work of making that transition will fall to the office and to the authorities, who are both going to have a role to play in what I imagine is going to be a lead authority model. So it's lots of change and churn, but I did want to clarify that this isn't the end of a function. It's the end of the governance model under which that function operates. The white paper, on the desk this morning I had confirmation that that's pushing into 2026. So clarity to come in, I don't know, there was probably a season attached to it, but again, I'll take that with a fairly large pinch of salt from my erstwhile government colleagues. So that's yeah, I think that's probably all we have at this point. But a lot of uncertainty and a lot of churn, and I appreciate the panel's support, and also recognise the impact on the panel itself and its staffing, who've also had this notice of change without any notice. Thanks.
Thank you, Johnny. I'll come to a couple of the points that Danielle raised on, or devolution, mayoralties and otherwise. I'll take my hat off as chair and put it back on as West Northants leader. As a council, we've advocated for the best deal for West Northants, and indeed the view is shared by the leader of North Northants as well, that the deal that was on the table regards to devolution, as in Western North Northants with Bedford, Central Bed, Luton and Milton Keynes, was always the best deal if there was to be one. But we'll note that back in July a motion was passed at full council in Milton Keynes that precluded the Northants authorities from a deal. So as such, we're in a bit of a deadlock that we can't really get where we would otherwise prefer to be to unlock the funding and other things you refer to. There's always the backstop, which I referenced in full council in June, that raised some eyebrows, that a combined county authority, which didn't meet the criteria for a devolution deal, was also an option if we were there. Obviously, the deadline for submissions was last week, and we didn't make a submission from West Northants. However, obviously the government is the authority that would render that possible if they thought so. But then there's also a point to note that last night there was an indication from the government that mayoralty elections across the country would be cancelled, therefore raising questions about the process of devolution and what that would look like without casting any aspersions otherwise. So it is the case that we communicate with our central government colleagues and push for the best deal for West Northants, whatever that might look like. But I hear your concerns, and I note the point that if you're double handling work, you're doing, well, it's more than double handling, it's further. And there's also the other reorganisations of councils around the country as well, with concerns being heard by the LJ now that 20 deals for next year for reorganisation is also not only politically but financially a huge challenge for those councils. So I'll share back with colleagues the best I can, and I will always feed back to the panel with any updates. I shall now put my hat back on as chair. Thank you. If we're good to move on, I will move on to point 7 of the agenda today, which is the delivery of the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner's Public Safety Plan for Northamptonshire 25 to 30. First, we have a speaker request from Mr. Simon Tilley. Is a following question for the panel. Would you like to take the seat there, sir? I think James will test your microphone for you.
Thank you. Chair, my question on the future safety plan, it references direct quotes from the Commissioner and her remarks at the last panel meeting just concerning the Buzzard Quashie litigation. At that meeting, the Commissioner appeared to indicate limited awareness of the matter, even though the issues began life as complaints raised directly handled by the Commissioner's office. These complaints, as we know, subsequently escalated, culminating in the Court of Appeal findings, resulting in a fine as well as significant cost exposure for the force. So my question is in 2 parts. The first is, as the Commissioner's office is the appropriate authority for police complaints at a pre-litigation stage, could the Commissioner outline what internal governance, escalation or oversight process exists to ensure that complaints involving similar serious data handling issues or showing a clear trajectory towards litigation are identified, monitored and acted upon in a timely way, the aim being to prevent such matters escalating and avoiding substantial financial consequences to the public purse that would impact the safety plan? And the second is more direct. It's with the Commissioner's never again remarks last week. Could the Commissioner reassure the panel by confirming whether her office is aware of any other impending costs, and if so, the projected value, for any other similar complaints or information governance concerns, handling data protection, GDPR, etc., that are on a projected potential trajectory towards litigation that, again, may give rise to financial or reputational exposure, and what scrutiny of the Chief Constable she has in place to mitigate such cost exposures?
Thank you, Mr. Tilley, and to give the Commissioner and her officers the opportunity to respond to the points if you wish to do so.
Thank you so much. I would, actually, so thank you for the opportunity. I need to clarify a couple of points, actually. Section 29 of the Police Reform Act 2002 sets out that the appropriate authority for the Chief Officer is the local policing body. For all other officers and staff, the appropriate authority is the Chief Constable. So we know that our Chief has got operational independence. I'm not the authority for the police, he is. In Northamptonshire, we have got a complaints model that I have to say is the envy of other commissioners' offices. So our customer service team has just won an excellence award, and it is known to be one of the most outstanding services in the country. So that team receives complaints, it triages the complaints, and it is really successful in getting outcomes for most of those complaints. The ones that they can't handle go to the Police Standards Board. I think it would be a really good idea if we could bring to you some information about the complaints team, the customer service team, and the work that they do, I don't know if you would like to put that into your work programme, but I think you might find it really quite interesting. And of course, it's something that's really important to me, because what I do with what they're doing is look for patterns of what is going wrong and look for patterns for what is going right. So yes, I think that's all I've got to say, really. I'm going to hand over to my monitoring officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Johnny?
Thank you. So when it comes to, as Danielle outlined, the complaints, the appropriate authority for the chief is her. For the rest of the service, it's the chief. So there's a question of panel's authority here in terms of who you're scrutinising, and obviously you're scrutinising Danielle in your core statutory role. So I wouldn't stray into what other legal matters are open. I would just note something, which is that the force is in the process of bringing its legal services back in-house for policing, fire and the office, which I think is a really positive move in terms of our grip over legal advice and legal services. We've got an excellent new head of legal who's just taken up post in recent days and weeks. And I think that's a really positive development. I won't go further than that because it'll be factored into the review that we talked about last time, and that's not on the agenda for this time, hence the extraordinary meeting that looked at the Buzzard Quashie case. But I think you'll be interested to hear about how that legal service is functioning and whether it's going to help us to correct some of the historic errors when it comes to the review work that we outlined last time. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Johnny. I've made a point to note here. We'll discuss. We have an item on the agenda for work plan later. So members of the panel, if you're happy to include the consideration of the Commissioner, we raise it under that item later on. So, Caroline?
Thank you. Can I just ask, Chair, because listening to what Mr Tilley's saying as well, is that what would be helpful, Commissioner, I think, and I think you've probably got this, is I know that you've got a call centre and I know they do a lot of triaging, so if we could actually see at some point, and I'm sure they are in the performance, is kind of the complaints received, what were triaged, where they were sent and the outcomes of those. So was there a satisfactory outcome to those complaints or did things bounce back? If we could kind of see that, that gives a little bit, that gives some assurance about actually how that organisation's working as a call centre, please. Thank you.
That was exactly what I had in mind when I made the suggestion.
Everybody happy with that? Craig? Councillor Morris?
Yeah, just that point that Mr Tilley made in relation to identifying the likelihood of litigation that's possibly going to come forward. That's always a difficult one, I appreciate it, because generally there may be a complaint, it may be sensitive at a particular part along the timeline. It's not something you can project and talk and give details of in terms of the hit on the taxpayer, those that pay their taxes, etc. So it is difficult. It's a difficult question, I think, that you've asked of the Commissioner there in the office, but I get it and understand what you're saying. It's important that the public know how much money we're going to be fined for doing something or not doing something the way perhaps we should have done. So I get that point, and I just wonder more perhaps for you, Johnny, if you would give us an indication as to how you might be able to do that and the reasons, if you can't, why you wouldn't. I think that would be really useful for Mr Tilley.
I guess it's a question, and thanks Craig, I think it's a question of who the litigation relates to. So in this case, this was about the force's actions and the Chief Constable, so it's not properly in Danielle's purview nor in turn in the panels. So I don't think I'll delve into the details, but as I say, I think that move towards having an in-house legal service. Currently we have a regional service that we buy into at some across the East Midlands region. I think that's part of us having that closer grip on things. Paul, I know you're not on the roster here, but you're part of the team working with us on that. Are you happy with that as an answer in relation to establishing a local legal services team?
Yeah. So as Johnny says, the head of legal started 3 weeks ago, newly appointed. I think this was something we wished to do anyway pre the events of the court case a few weeks ago, clearly, because she arrived the week of the court case into role. And we do feel that will give us better oversight, better grip, better locality. It will feed some of the themes that I will be discussing in my paper later on around locality and putting Northants first are part of why legal is coming away from the region, because it's remote, it's in Derbyshire. You can't see the whites of the eyes more often than not of the person that you're engaging with.
Thanks, Paul. So just for clarity, that's Paul Bullen, who's the Assistant Chief Officer in charge of enabling services in Northamptonshire. So yes, I hope that's a sort of suitably answer on the structure and some of the mitigations that we're putting in place.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Webb, Mr. Bullen, and Chair, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Tilly. I think you're free to go. Thank you. I hope that provided you some clarity to your points, sir. The next request I have is from Miss Amy Fuzzard from the University of Northampton, who wishes to speak again on the safety plan and the safe routes into Northamptonshire. And I think your microphone is ready to go.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members of Council. I'm a final year student at the University of Northampton, and I'm here today because a route that once symbolised safety, partnership and community between the university and the town has quietly fallen into neglect, yet its importance has never been greater for us. For years, the designated safe route connecting the university to the town centre helps students travel confidently, especially during busy evenings and different periods. It was just a pathway for us. It wasn't just a pathway for us, sorry. It was a promise. One that said the council recognised student safety as a priority and that the town welcomed us. But as many of us know, that promise has faded. Without maintenance, lighting and clear signage, the route has become invisible. And with that invisibility has come something far more concerning: vulnerability. Students, many young, many living away from home for the first time, are now walking routes that they don't recognise through areas that are poorly lit and without clear guidance, and we've seen the consequences. In our town centre, there was 158 reported incidents of violence and sexual offences in 1 month of September alone. This is not an abstract number. It reflects real events, real fear and real risk. Students who once felt comfortable walking into town now avoid it altogether, take expensive transport or resort to staying isolated inside. To put this into context, recent university-wide polling highlights that 51% of all students at our university feel to some degree a deep concern for their personal safety. However, this is not just a safety issue. When students don't feel safe moving around Northampton, they become less connected to local community, local culture, and the town itself. We want to be a part of Northampton. We want to support the local economy. We want to feel proud of where we study and live, but safety must come first. As correctly identified in the Public Safety Plan, prevention is key to building a safer community. Restoring the safe route would require modest investment compared to the cost of dealing with preventable incidents at a later date. Clear signage, improved lighting, regular maintenance and visibility campaigns could go a long way towards rebuilding trust. And that trust would pay dividends. Safe students, a safer town, and a strengthened relationship between the university and the community. I'm not here to assign blame, I'm here seeking partnership. We don't ask for luxury, we ask for dignity, for safety, and for the right to walk home without constantly checking over our shoulders or having to remove our headphones out of fear of just becoming another statistic. The route already exists. The framework is already in place. We are just missing the support from local leaders like those of you in this room to bring back our safe route and show that Northampton is and always will be a secure place to study. The safe route is an investment into safety, community, and in the well-being of thousands of young people who call Northampton a home. Thank you for your time, and I hope you will consider this issue that matters so deeply to many of us.
Thank you, Ms. Fuzzard. Before I get to the Commissioner, I'll just note you are rather fortunate. You've got Councillor Keeble in the room and Councillor Butler, who's the Cabinet Member for Highways and Transport. So I'll go to the Commissioner first, but you are rather lucky you've got some talent in the room today that will add some value to your point for you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Amy. And I'm really delighted to hear that the safer routes were working for you and for the students, because I know there's been some conversations about whether they have proved to have an impact or not. So I'm delighted to hear they have. I think we need to be really clear about the things you're talking about and whose responsibility it is. It's not my office's responsibility, it's the council's and it's the university. My job is to help support safety measures. So my office did put in just over £8,000, I think, to support safety measures along that route. And I do have funding available for people coming forward to suggest ideas to help improve safety. What I really want to do, though, is make sure that wherever we are, young people are safe and women and girls are safe. So it's not just about a safe route. It's having a safe community and a safe context. So in that regard, we launched the Northamptonshire Women's Charter on Monday, and we are inviting organisations, and we've had 8 signed up on Monday. We're inviting organisations to take on the Charter. The Charter is about scoping the safety of women and girls. Now, you might think that is a bit excluding of young men and boys. It isn't, because the thinking is, the experience is that if women and girls are safe, then everybody is. So I would be delighted if the university came forward as a signatory for the Charter, and indeed if the council did. So with that, I'm interested in the figures you gave us. With that Charter are lots of tools for people to use. So one of them is a survey. So we really need to know on each work site and where people are, who feels safe and who doesn't, why they don't feel safe, and where it is. Because there are some environmental protections that can be put into place, and you have got the right people here to do that. Councillor Butler is listening to you very carefully, I can see. So there are environmental protections that can be put in place, and you've talked about them. But there are other considerations as well. So where people are not feeling safe, as part of the Charter, there's a directory of organisations that people can be referred to for support. I think that's quite important as well. And there are training tools available for the staff, would be for your student union, for anybody who's got that responsibility to keep people safe. There are tools available. So I welcome your question. I'll be delighted to work with partners to help improve the situation, but the main responsibility isn't ours. It is West Northampton and it is the university. But anything that we can do to support the safety of the students, we will do. Is that okay? And while I'm on topic, Chair, if you don't mind, I'd like to invite this young woman to the Vorg conference that we're running on December the 10th. If you would like to speak to this lady here after the meeting, she'd give you the link. Is that okay?
Thank you, Danielle. I'll go to Councillor Keeble first, point, and then Councillor Butler, if you can add some value.
Thanks very much for coming in and speaking, and you've come to actually just the right place, because at one level, yes, it's right that there's been these incidents and that's down to the police, but actually policing and prevention and community safety is a much wider issue, and a lot of that responsibility rests with the council. The council has been looking at its walking strategy through town. I'm sure that you'll be talking about that as well. And the issues that you've highlighted are absolutely key to that, because there's no point having a walking strategy that people can't use because they don't feel safe. And there are a lot of issues going on in Northampton, particularly obviously during the winter months when the darkness doesn't help. There's issues that I'm sure you'll talk about, Councillor Butler, and if you don't, then I'm sure I'll be speaking to you afterwards about that as well. About the street lighting, about the state of the pavements, about the amount of refuse and sort of general environmental damage, which ends up making an area feel unsafe, and if it feels unsafe, then people don't use it so well. And obviously, the biggest safeguard people have really also is areas being very well used. There's also, at one stage, when there were experiments going on with the neighbourhood wardens, and they were seen, as part of the policing family, the crime rates dropped very dramatically in the areas that they were introduced, and people were able to go out and use the area more because they felt safer, because they're accompanied, and that was also accompanied by the better street lighting. I have noticed that particularly late at night in the middle of Northampton, that some of the pedestrian routes that students would use to get down to the campus and back again, that there's no lighting. They're quite steep, some of them. There's not a lot of traffic either, so there's no lighting coming from the cars. There's a lot of tree growth. The undergrowth isn't cleared, and there's a lot of really straightforward measures like that which could actually be tackled and could produce results quite quickly. I mean, it might be helpful perhaps, I don't know, perhaps you've already done this, but if there were some walkthroughs, I'd be happy to go with you, Councillor Butler, and to walk through some of those places and just pick up on some of the easy wins that you could get to make the walkthroughs safer, so that students don't feel trapped in a hall of residence or something like that and can't get out and enjoy the town. And if you want that, then would you be happy to do that, Councillor Butler? Yeah. And I'm sure we could get some of the local councillors to take it on board as well. Okay.
Thanks, Councillor Keeble. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Amy. Would you be willing to see me up there, meet me up there, and we'll go through it and do a, rather than talk through it here? Yeah? I'll meet you afterwards and we'll sort it all out. And then we'll liaise with everybody involved. Police, Councillor Keeble. Good, excellent. Look forward to it. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks very much, Councillor. Are you happy with that, Amy? Yeah. Good. Thanks very much. Thank you very much for coming in, and as always, to university colleagues and friends are always welcome. This one, I have actually had another request to speak before the report is introduced, and it's from Councillor Aldridge, who's sitting in the public gallery, and it's about item 7 as well. So, at my discretion, I will allow you to speak.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that. I want to really talk about the study tours. Because having experienced one of those study tours fairly recently, I just want to convey how much the local residents and community members valued that kind of an approach, which is focused on prevention. It is focused on engagement of communities to identify the hotspots and to engage the communities in finding solutions. So that is, and I know that in another ward that took place about a year ago, and I know there's been really positive feedback on that. So what I really wanted to ask the Commissioner and your team is, how do we ensure that those study tours continue to be maintained and are possibly extended, and also the pace through which action is taken is greater, so that all the areas that are identified and agreed upon as being important to take forward within a locality actually move forward at pace as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Aldridge. Danielle, it's your report to introduce. I don't know if you want to acknowledge that point now or do it in your...
I will, and I'm really glad to get that feedback about our study tours. It was an innovation from my office, and I think we've conducted 5 or 6 in the last year across the county. And the purpose of those is to improve the safety of a particular locality. And we choose the localities based on the data that we look at about what's going on. We're really keen on working with partners, and you'll be aware there are items in the action plan that are for your council. There's points in the action plan for the study tour Councillor Aldridge is talking about for my office, for the housing department, for the whole multi-agency partnership. So we're a bit dependent on everybody doing their little bit. But they are really valuable, and I think my next study tour is in Wellingborough, actually, so I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you, Councillor Aldridge. So at this point, I will invite the Commissioner's team to introduce the item. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you so much for that. So you've been given a huge amount of information, and I'm happy to answer questions on any of that, as will my team. I just wanted to draw your attention to several things. So my public safety plan has got 3 missions and 4 tests, as you know. We've talked about it before. I just wanted to give you some of the highlights. I've already mentioned the Northamptonshire Women's Charter. This is so important. Nearly 20% of all crimes across the county are violent crimes, and they're crimes against women and girls. So trying to intervene to stop it happening is a huge part of my mission. I want our communities to be safe, and I want them to be safe for everybody. So the Women's Charter is really important for me, as is the conference that we're having with lots and lots of national speakers next Wednesday, I think it is, on the 10th of December. So out of that conference, what we'll be looking for is to deepen our understanding collectively of what is driving that violence and what we can do collectively to stop it happening in the first place. So that's really important. In my plan, I talk about having visible and accessible community services. So I've been on a mission to bring policing closer to the community and the community closer to policing, and I've talked to you about that quite a lot. I think in my term so far, we have held 13 different round tables, and those round tables are problem-solving gatherings of people who share the problem and who can bring forward some of the solutions. One of the initiatives we ran during the summer was the Safer Street Summer Initiative, and this programme had particular emphasis on reducing shoplifting and enhancing public safety in the town centres. We've had the most amazing feedback from that, and it seemed to work. So lots of lessons learned by all of us around that. My team has developed bystander training products for train and taxi drivers. We have reported on that before, and I'm really pleased that that initiative is being taken up nationally as well, and including by the College of Policing. Our Safer Nights Out snow vehicles remain a key part of how we keep people safe in the nighttime economy, and that's provided with financial support by my office, but it's actually another project that uses volunteers. So one of the things I might suggest to you for a future work programme is citizens in policing. I'm terribly proud of the work that's happening all over the county by volunteers who support the police in their communities. I think it needs to be known about a little bit more. You had a presentation at the last meeting from our Victims Services Voice, and you will know that referrals there are going up and up and up, and the incidents, the kind of violence that's being experienced by women and girls in this county is off the scale. It's absolutely off the scale. So at the moment, they're holding 500 cases, unprecedented numbers going on. And I'm looking forward to the partnership around, particularly the Sunflower Centre, coming together to recognise the urgency of maintaining that service and putting in support for it where it's needed. We've talked about customer service. I think it would be really brilliant if you received a presentation on that. I've given you information about how many young people we've been talking to about their experience of policing. What's been really interesting about that survey, we haven't released it yet because we're waiting for the young people to produce recommendations. But there's a high level of confidence that police know what they're doing. But there isn't an awful lot of trust in how they approach young people. So there's obviously something there for us to consider. Lots and lots of work going on. A new initiative we've just started, I'm so very, very pleased about, is looking at the needs of the children whose parents are in prison. It's something that we've only just started, and we've got 27 cases being looked after at the minute in that regard. I'm really pleased about that. And again, we've talked about before the immediate justice programme, doing amazing work out in the localities, and I'm really pleased about that. But I'm happy to receive any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'll go around the room. Ms Woodhouse.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Chair. Commissioner, when you first got into post, you said that you were going to be going out and engaging with the community, and anyone who knows you and lives in Northampton know that you really enjoy engaging with the communities. But for me, and from what I'm hearing, is that a lot of people feel that the level of engagement that's been going on, in particular in East Northamptonshire, I don't know if you've been out and had a big conversation around there, but I've not heard anything about that in that area. And I wonder, from your perspective, because clearly those conversations are directing the focus in terms of how public money has been spent. And so for people who are not having a voice in that situation, how much of that is the public funding is being used and being pushed towards people who's got a voice as opposed to those who's not been given the opportunity or had the opportunity to have that big conversation. So that's one thing. The second thing is the big conversation focused mainly on the burning points at the moment that's in people's minds, or is it about what's best for the people of Northamptonshire, providing public safety and confidence and assurance that money's been spent in the right way? So I'm just going to leave that open. You can treat that as a big conversation from your strategic lead perspective in terms of answering those two questions.
Thank you. Could I just ask for a bit of clarification? Sorry. Thank you, Pauline. Were you talking about East Northamptonshire or East Northampton?
East Northampton, as in like the Standard Barns area, that kind of area, around those areas.
So we organised a public meeting at Standens Barn. We held it in the school.
Right.
Quite a lot of families came, and we talked about safety around the school in those streets, and we talked about safety in the home. And my team gave out lots of helpful devices and tools, including smart water kit for people in that area. We left that meeting with a promise to return if we were invited back. We haven't had an invitation back, so I'm gathering that people were quite satisfied with that meeting. And we do a lot of work in that side of the town through our PCSOs. And of course we have a police presence there, don't we? So yes, very close to my heart, that one. With the big conversation, what we're talking to people about is their experience of policing and what they want from their police. That's what we're talking to them about. And we do it through having a broad range of demographic and through focus groups. So we take soundings from people all of the time. But, you know, I think with my round tables, I think I've had over 22, you know, and we always have a room full of people. And those conversations go on in that room, but they go on beyond that room as well. So I'm quite satisfied that we get out and about and talk to people as much as we possibly can. And Marianne, my deputy at the moment, is doing a round of visiting all the different women's groups across the county. And that's proving to be very popular as well. And she's getting lots of really good feedback from that.
Okay. Can I just ask, where are those meetings advertised in terms of when they're happening, and how are they publicised so that local residents can understand that it's happening?
Which meetings are you talking about?
Like your big conversation, you said you had one at the school and lots of families and...
We leafleted, my team leafleted the neighbourhood and invited families.
Okay.
But when we're out with groups, like I did a residents' meeting in Southfields recently. I think there were 53 people in the room. Councillor Keeble, you were there? I was invited to that, so they advertised that meeting. So it depends on the meeting and who owns it, really.
Okay. So could you just build on the point where I'm saying that when you have those conversations that are driving the safe and sound policies or strategies that you've got in terms of setting priorities and, I guess, getting on with the job at hand, how do you... I'm not really quite sure. I'm still struggling as a panel member in terms of understanding how the big conversation, at what point your strategic lead kind of start building and working to a plan rather than constantly introducing something new, if that makes sense.
Just for clarity, Chair, the plan is a 5-year plan, so it was based on the big conversation. The conversation that's going on as we speak is around the budget and the precept setting. So
Yes.
they're two different things. Regardless of that, we take soundings from the public as much as we possibly can. And we use different mechanisms for that. The Women's Charter is going to be really interesting in that regard, because as workplaces survey the women in their work, we want women to be safe at work, don't we? We want them to be safe going to work. We want them to be safe going home from work. The results of those surveys are going to be very interesting, aren't they? We are trying to have conversations in as many different places with as many different people as we possibly can. And to be honest with you, you know, I think we're doing far more than most commissioners' offices are.
Okay, thank you. Can I just have one more point? So only this week they were talking about the Sarah Haverard plan, and since that was introduced, that a lot of police forces have not been kind of picking up anything from that and acting accordingly. How are you supporting your local?
When that headline came out, I checked with the chief what we were doing. We invited Angelini into Northamptonshire, actually, and we've been working with her a lot. We're not one of those forces that was mentioned. We're not in that quarter. And I'm really pleased to say that we've made quite a big contribution to her report. Does the monitoring officer have anything to say?
No, just that just to note what you have noted, that you saw assurance that we weren't on that list of services who are felt to be failing to meet the mark. I think Northampton's ahead of the curve. We've had the Angelini team in and out of Derby House many times.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you both. Councillor Keeble.
Thank you. It picks up really, I think, on some of those points, which is that it's great about the conference and about the action about the Women's Charter and about the action on violence against women and girls. But I do notice in the reports that there's still a challenge around sexual crimes and violence against women, and also obviously about domestic violence. And I wonder, therefore, well, I appreciate your comments on how you're going to bring forward the results of the conference and from the week so that we can see the results of that work and start to see those figures really seriously coming down. I think there's been a bit of a downward drip, but it would be good to see them really coming sharply down.
Chair, let me respond to that. One of our difficulties is that we know that only 15% of quite serious violent instances get reported to the police. And we know that that is a very complex area to work in. It's not just a matter for policing. It is a matter for all of us. But I think that when trust and confidence in policing rises, so will the figures, because there will be more reporting. And that is going to be a bit problematic if we're only judged on those figures. We need to be able to tell the story behind that. So I want to see those figures going up because I want victims to feel safe and trusting in the outcomes when they do report. Now, one of the problems we've had is that when the Sure Start centres were closed, women lost that context in which they felt safe to report to staff, and where staff could pick up on observations about what might be going wrong. And it's part of what we're saying to employers, actually, is that, you know, we all have a duty to support and to encourage people to be brave enough to deal with the situation they're in. And it's often very, very complex and difficult. But we want people to be more aware of what's happening with their own staff and look for the signs and to be able to offer help and support.
Come back on that. I mean, I think people understand about the fact that a first step in the process of tackling domestic abuse is to ensure that people feel confident to report it. So, you know, the first stage, if you like, is the reporting going up. However, I would have thought by now we should be in a position that we should be able to see some improvements in terms of prosecutions and in terms of action and action against perpetrators, because that also helps as a deterrent as well. So I think it would be really helpful if, and this can't be done overnight, completely understand that, but if out of the conference there's some serious look at how we get beyond the point of just getting the extra reporting and we do get the clearer. Actually, with domestic abuse, you tend to know who the perpetrator is. There's sometimes action in catching the perpetrator and convicting them, but you do normally know who the perpetrator is. But there's a lot, and I take really seriously the points a student made earlier, Amy made earlier, that if there are incidents and women feel unsafe, then sometimes their action is just not to go out, and that's the worst thing of all, because that means that the crime is limiting their lives. So I hope that we'll get some really careful consideration coming out of this month's action, particularly out of the conference, so we can see not just the reporting going up, but the clear-ups and the incident and the management of it starting to go down.
Well, of course, the criminal justice system it's not in my gift to do very much about that, although I am the national lead for the commissioners and I am in regular contact with the Home Office about all these matters, and you will be aware that there's been the Leveson Review and the Gork Review, which will change the context in which we are meeting with all these challenges, I have to say. But, not all victims want to have a court and criminal justice solution. So we still need to work with multi-agencies to support the victims in the way that they need to be supported. Some of that is around housing. some of that is around moving to a different location. These are very complex cases and they need to be dealt with each on their own merit. We do need to have swifter justice, absolutely. I sat with a judge on the, 6 months ago listening to a case that was 6 years old, a rape case. It's completely unacceptable, isn't it? So I'm really glad that the government is taking steps to improve the criminal justice system. But we also need other partners to be aware of what they can do to support victims as well.
Thank you, Danielle. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to defer to Councillor Morris. He's got the same stuff. Thank you.
Councillor Morris.
Yes, Chair, thank you. Commissioner, one of the things I sort of think back to in my day, again, no low ballers here, it's just a point perhaps you might want to think about as well, and the team, was the method in which the police choose to record or not to record crimes. And that is always a challenge, right? And whatever you say, I've seen it firsthand many times. I'm not saying there's a dishonest action or anything that's fraudulent or wrong, but ethically and morally, I think the police do have a duty to listen to a victim that hits all of the points of a theft, for example, a dishonest appropriation of property belonging to another, intending to permanently deprive that other, the victim of it. 5 points, tick, 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 that's a crime done. They then have the duty to record it, issue a crime report for that particular crime, for example, and then go away and do something about it, investigate it, and hopefully, you know, arrest somebody and do something positive. I think the worry is with the public, and you will know this, and I think you've touched on it earlier actually, that we do need police forces to be encouraged to record crime and not be embarrassed about recording it. That's really critical, and the chief should be told that there's nothing wrong with having 10,000 criminal damages on the books, of which 9,400 are undetected. There's nothing wrong with that if they don't have the funds and the support to be able to get there and choose it, and particularly if they're prioritising more important things, and you know what I'm talking about. I get that, and the public get it too. I think the public are very frustrated when police officers come around their houses, or worse, don't, see the crime, understand it, and then do nothing about it, other than issue a date, time, incident reference, and no crime number is ever issued, because they don't want it on their books as an undetected crime. That has to change, and I'd like to think it's changing now, but that's an absolute priority in my mind. Victims need to know when they report crime that it's going to damn well be recorded, and that someone's going to do something about it, even if it's undetected. That's just a point I'd like to make.
You're absolutely right, Councillor Morris, that, you know, the public are realistic, aren't they? They know that not every crime is going to be solved. They know that. And you're absolutely right. What they want is the police to listen to them properly with civility and to get back to them to tell them exactly what's happening. And that's what we've been holding the chief to account for. We've been doing it recently around burglary. But yes, you're absolutely right. And it's one of the measures that we look for.
Thank you, Commissioner. Daniel, thank you, Councillor Morris. Councillor Lister. Councillor Towns.
Thank you, Chair. Danielle, let's get that a bit closer. Yeah, I welcome the initiative with the Women's Charter and Covenant, and it's something I'll be taking back to my own town council for one thing. I've just note that we've had the four police officers are facing misconduct charges relating to the Hachitabrella murder in Corby, and that was publicised with the Invisible Women campaign, which focuses on black minority and migrant women and issues around language and things. And I just want to be some reassurance that specific type of issue is getting incorporated into this safer plan. And yeah, because I've had in my time as a councillor, we've had some very sad murders of minority people in my ward. So I just wondered if that's being addressed in this and within the police force.
It is part of my priority. So at the Women's Conference, we'll be hearing from Southall Black Sisters and Sister Space, who represent and advocate for marginalised black and brown communities. So I'm really looking forward to their presentations. I take it really, really seriously. I've asked the chief very, very recently, or not the chief, one of the assistant chief, who's in charge of VORG, whether we do enough work looking at victim-blaming language in reporting, because that can obviously have a really bad impact. And I'm assured that there are lots of processes and procedures in place, and where victim-blaming language is seen, it's taken out. So I've been really assured about that. But I am really, really interested to see what actions do come out of the conference in those regards. So thank you for the question.
Mr. Frost.
Yeah, mine's a slightly different question, Danielle. Sorry? So my question is slightly different in that you spent a lot of time when you first came to office telling us that you'd gone out to consultation, getting feedback from the public, and your plan was about making the public feel safe. I suppose my question is, how have you gone back to those people to make sure the plan that you're talking to us about today is delivering what those people asked you to deliver when you started your journey?
Sorry? What do you mean? Oh, right. I've just been told democracy. And, you know, the public give you their verdict, don't they, during elections? I'm sorry I won't be standing again, so I won't be able to pick up on that. What we do, though, the chief and I do a lot of walkabouts together. We do the round tables together. We listen really hard to people. He takes away a lot of the suggestions because they're problem-solving meetings. We've just had a chief's chat where we fielded over 200 questions. You know, we're taking the temperature of the public all the time. The angriest group of people we had at my very first roundtable were retailers. They were very angry, and town centre managers. They're no longer angry because they really appreciate all the ameliorations that the chief has put in to support the town centres and to support retailers. There's a huge amount more work to do. You will see in retail crime an example of what I was talking about. There was massive underreporting, so the figures have gone right up because the confidence in policing has gone up too. So we do what we can.
Councillor MacDonald.
Good afternoon, Commissioner. I've got a couple of questions about your tests and missions. You've got 4 tests and 3 missions. I just wonder how you're going to measure them.
Thanks. So the plan that you see, the document you see today is a bit of a progress report on what we're up to. In the annual report, you'll get a full breakdown of what we've achieved against the plan. What we're not in the business of is setting targets. I think there's different approaches to that, but I agree with the Commissioner's position that setting targets can lead to perverse consequences, and policing has a checkered history of setting the target and missing the point. I see cops in the room nodding their heads. So we're not setting targets, but that doesn't mean we're not counting and we're not using metrics in a smarter way. I think we're going to take a basket of measures approach to the whole plan in order to understand whether a set of metrics in a given area indicate that we're on the right direction of travel. And we'll be bringing back with the annual report a crisp appraisal of that. So I think the suite of documents is last time we showed you everything we know in terms of the data set that we use. This time we've brought a shorter report giving a flavour of how we use that data set in practice. And with the annual report, you'll see the fuller assessment of performance against those metrics. But it's important to say that we're not in the target setting business in the Commissioner's office.
No, but I was just in the assurance that they're going to be measured, or else you're never going to know whether you've succeeded or not. which then leads me nicely on to my second question. Thank you, Miss. Thank you, Johnny. You mentioned earlier this is a 5-year plan. Hate to take your legs away. You haven't got 5 years. So I wonder, you know, you're going to have to go away, I would suggest, and have a look at how you're going to measure this in the 2 years that you've got left, or we've got left, or whether you're planning that this will be a continuation. I know we're in this sort of grey world at the minute about where we're going, but I wondered how you're going to adapt this plan for the shorter term.
It is perfectly possible for us to adapt, revise and amend the plan if we take it out to further consultation. I'm not particularly interested in doing that. What I am interested in doing is how my plan meshes with the Chief's plan and with the Fire Chief's plan. I think, again, for Northamptonshire, I'm really proud of that, you know. We worked really hard to achieve that. Because what happens in most areas is you have all separate plans and they don't actually knit together very well. Here, we have my strategic plan and then we have the 2 chiefs' operational plans. So we're all fighting for the same thing. We're all out for the same results. And the results is safer communities and swifter justice. That's what we're after. I think the difference having neighbourhood policing back has made is enormous. Having more PCSOs out and about is proving to be really, really important. Some of the big policing activities that have happened in the last couple of months has been the result of local intelligence, which just proves the point that neighbourhood policing and having PCSOs on the ground is really, really important. So I'm very happy that we're going in the right direction. And I'm really happy that we are working with this multi-agency problem-solving approach, because all the issues that are concern to the public includes policing, but it's not just about policing, is it? It's about the way we all work together.
Turned them off. Thank you, Danielle. Yeah, and as you said, as you know, there are several around this table who've spent many years out in the rain. And as an ex-police officer, I'd say you can't value or you can't measure what a good beat Bobby does. You know, it's amazing what they can and can't do. I'll just take you on to violence. You quoted some statistics for violence. Just want to clarify that I understood correctly. You basically said that 20% of crimes are violent in the violent category. Okay, but you then said that you alluded to the fact that that was predominantly females as victims. Well, that's funny because I think I would suggest that basically you might have a look at that unless we're singing off for different figures, because the biggest number of victims are men between 16 and 24 for violence. Women are higher in the categories of sexual assaults and domestic violence, etc. So I just wonder if you could clarify that for us, about where your figures are. You know, personally speaking, I'm a bit of a data freak. I appreciate you probably won't be able to do it now.
No, I'll get you the figures. I'll get you the clarification. Thank you.
That's fine. And you're talking about violence and sexual offences where women are predominantly the victims. I'm just wondering what studies, because of course in order to address it you need to know where the issue is. Where are you looking for the areas where we have the biggest concerns? What groups, what communities? I mean, we had the young lady on earlier talking about students and they're feeling safe. Is that a group? Is that an age group or a demographic group that are particularly at risk? And so how do we address the groups? You know, we have got limited resources, so let's target them rather than doing a broad brush. I wonder if you've given any thought to that.
I've given a lot of thought to it, and the received wisdom around all of that, not just mine, but nationally, is that violence and sexual violence impacting women and girls affects every demographic. There is no woman that you could say is safe from that. So that is why I want to have an approach which is about systemic change. We need systemic change to keep all women and all girls safe. Now, there are women within those categories, so disabled women, women of colour, who are impacted even more. than some women are. So we need to have particular regard for that. But we need to change the context of all women's lives, and that is why I'm holding the conference I'm holding, so that we can understand collectively what that systemic change looks like, and we can all work together on that change.
Thank you for that. I will be at your conference, and I certainly know a family friend who now lives in London, and they now no longer feel safe. A young woman, very successful young lady. So anything we can do to make all our population feel safer, you'll certainly get my support. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McDonald. Councillor Kellett.
Hi, Danielle. You once said it wasn't all about figures, it was about feelings. Are you feeling now, since you've took your term, that Northampton, in your opinion, is feeling safer and more transparent, under your watch?
You've turned it off, Commissioner.
That would be a very tall order in 18 months, wouldn't it? I'm not a magician. What I'm trying to say is I think we're all heading in the right direction. And these matters are not just about policing. They are about putting the lights on. They are about cutting back the bushes. They are about having youth hubs. They are about having family hubs. There's an awful lot of work that needs to be going on in terms of prevention, as well as intervention, as well as enforcement. We've got this right care, right person phrase that's being talked about. That's about the police not having to pick up on where all the other services are failing. That's about, if somebody is having a mental health crisis, they are looked after by mental health experts. They don't have to be looked after by the police. There is a huge amount of work that we all need to be doing, and we are doing, but it takes time. It takes time.
Okay, but generally you are happy that things are going in the right direction?
Very happy, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Kellett. Councillor Simms.
Good afternoon. Sorry, I think actually the two things I was going to raise have already just been raised regarding data differences and the adaptation to the 5-year plan, so I guess I'll wait the answers back on those.
Thanks, Councillor Simms. Dr. Keese.
Thank you. Just a quick question, really, and I'm hoping this may be covered in the annual report, but I really get the need to be focused on women and violence against women. But I know, and you'll probably know this, there is also a large group out there that you've not spoke about, which is vulnerable adults, people with a learning disability that have been subject to cuckooing, scamming, and there's been a doubling in rise in terms of financial abuse for that kind of person. So I'm hoping that that is part of what's covered in your annual report when it comes through, because I'm seeing in my other role an absolute rise in that, and particularly around cuckooing, and particularly people with a learning disability being targeted across the UK. So it'd be really important if we can cover that off as well in the annual report and what we're doing to do that. That'd be really helpful. Thank you.
There is a vulnerable people's strategic group that looks at all of those issues, I'm very pleased to say. I'm really pleased that the government has recognised cuckooing about time too, in terms of it being brought to the Adult Safeguarding Board. When I was on the Adult Safeguarding Board, I tried very hard to get those issues brought onto the agenda, and they're always turned down, but they are on the agenda now, aren't they? And I do know we've got teams of people looking really closely at all of that.
Thanks, Dr. Keese. Commissioner. Councillor Lister's just raised his hand to come in.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of things on a couple of points that you've made regarding, firstly, around confidence in policing. So we can see from the report that confidence is actually declining. It's only slightly, 1.5%, but it's still well below the national average in confidence. And I appreciate you're saying you're not a miracle worker, but it has declined since the last quarter. So I'm interested to know what we're doing and how we're going to start to increase that confidence. And also something we touched on last time, you've mentioned about your retail crime panels. We talked about the number of offences increasing, but there's no detection rates in there and how many crimes that are actually being solved from that I can find. Perhaps I've missed it somewhere. And I think our positive outcomes are still below the national average from that perspective as well. Well, the only thing I can find in there is around positive outcomes. So I'd be interested on those, because I think we've certainly retail crime we mentioned last time. Thank you.
One of the difficulties we have with comparisons is that not everybody records in the same way, reports in the same way, and monitors in the same way. So these are kind of approximations, if you like. So one of the things I'm really pleased about is that my data teams have been working with Gloucestershire on how we can better understand what the national picture is. So they're leading the way in terms of collating all the information force by force by force and making it all available nationally, so people can do much better comparisons of what is going on than we had before. But we try and, I think Dr. Cuss raised this very early on, you know, we need to know the direction of travel. We need to know how we compare with our neighbours. We need to know how we compare nationally. And we do a lot of work trying to understand all of that. But it is difficult when people use different systems and different methodologies. So we do the best we can in that regard. When we are reporting on trust and confidence, it's a snapshot in time. And what we need to see are longer term trends.
Thanks, Commissioner. I'm just going to pass over to James. Looking at the outcomes on this item, now we've been around the room, I assume there's no other comments to make. There's a couple of summary points there, which we may take forward to the work plan, like we alluded to before. James?
Thank you, Chair. So, yes, I mean, as with many items that come to the panel, this is essentially an opportunity for the panel to hear how something is going and to reach any conclusions on that it wishes to do so. So if there are any conclusions, recommendations that the panel wishes to make about the delivery of the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner's public safety plan so far, then it's open to you to do so. I mean, otherwise, there were various possibilities for topics that the panel may want to incorporate in its future work programme that were mentioned during discussion. So there was a suggestion from the Commissioner that it might be useful to bring something on complaints to the panel in future. And again, possibly related to that, an item on customer service. And again, from the Commissioner, a suggestion that it might be interesting for the panel to look at the role of citizens in, well, I don't know whether that should be expressed as policing or in community safety. I think that may have been it, or possibly a point of clarification around the data on victims of violence and young men being the primary group within that. That I think is what I got, Chair.
Thank you, James. Councillor Keeble.
Thanks. I'd have thought, I mean, there's been a lot of discussion from, I think, all of us about the issues around violence against women and girls, and perhaps a report back from the conference that we can look at. We could put that into the work programme, yeah, and also taking on board the point that Dr. Kuss made about the adults and vulnerable adults and safeguarding and issues around cuckooing, which so that we get some figures on that and perhaps look at some of those issues.
I think we've got that down for the
I think the violence against women and girls would obviously be a very important one.
Danielle, Johnny? Anything on that? Okay, yeah. So that's all been noted down for the minutes. If that's that, we'll close that item and move on, if everyone is okay, all noted. Thank you.
Can I introduce the next item, please, Chair?
You can. I'm just going to read the title of it for you, Commissioner, first, if I might. So, point 8 on today's agenda, is the operation of enabling services. I've actually got Paul Bullen down to introduce it, but Commissioner, over to you.
Just very briefly, because I'm really proud of this service, and I'm really pleased that we deliver in the way that we do. I'm often asked by other commissioners how on earth we manage our budget, because we don't receive fair funding, never have done, for policing in this county. And you will know that some other areas, Lincolnshire is one, are really, really struggling to balance their books. And we are not in a brilliant place financially, but we are in a safe place, if I can put it like that. And there's lots of contributing factors. We've got a brilliant finance team is one of them. I'm not just saying that because Vaughan is sitting next to me. But there are lots of contributing factors, and one of them is our enabling services. So because my office, the police and the fire share all the enabling services, we've been able to cut out duplication and inefficiencies. And I'm really content that we get a huge value for money from the service. So I am very pleased to introduce you to Paul Bullen in his role as the Assistant Chief and Head of our Enabling Services function. Paul.
Thanks, Commissioner. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioner, for that glowing introduction. So you have the paper. I'm not going to read out the paper, but I just want to pick out a few points and make a few additions, if you will, to it as we go. So it's 5.5 years now that we have been sharing enabling services between the three organisations, as the Commissioner describes. But I'm going to take us back a little bit further than that, if I can, to start with, because I was thinking for other reasons, and actually having the former Deputy Chief Constable in the room also reminded me it's probably 10 years ago that we started the business case to move the Fire and Rescue Service from the then County Council to the Commissioner's office. I say that point partly because 10 years ago, they only moved in 2019, so 3 to 4 years for a transition. In that case, in a relatively simple transition. But what did we have before we joined together as a joint enabling services? So I wanted to just kind of hark back to what the two organisations had at that time. So again, the ex-police officers in the room will be aware that historically Northampton Police will have had senior police officers in charge of its HR functions, its IT functions, its I don't recall the finance function ever being, but it may well have been at some point predating me. We also had a shared service arrangement with Cheshire Police, Nottinghamshire Police and Civil Nuclear Constabulary, the multi-force shared service, based in Winsford in Cheshire. I say that because not in the county. In theory, the things it did, processing invoices, paying people, could be done anywhere in the world, couldn't they? But there was, for I think 2 or 3 years in a row, value for money findings within the external audits because of multi-force shared service. Cheshire Police did not have that. I say that point because they were based in Cheshire. Funnily enough, they got a better service. People were able to see people were able to go and actually stand at people's desks and get things moving. It did not work for the people of this county at all. Northamptonshire Fire and Rescue Service obviously were part of the County Council, part of LGSS, and councillors in the room you will probably already be aware of the failings that came with LGSS and the fact that it was later wound up for its inefficiencies as well. So I say that to give you the context of what was inherited 5.5 years ago. I also say, I suppose, where we are now is we have people who are specialists in their functions leading those functions. Police officers are great at lots of things. They are great leaders in many, many ways. But they don't know the detail around how you manage a particularly difficult individual in an employee relations case. They don't know the detail of which wire to put into which box to make an IT system work. So we have specialists in charge of each of those departments in enabling services now. That business case that I talked about 10 years ago was not predicated on the Commissioner at the time then saving any money from fire and rescue coming out of the County Council. It was about providing a more secure, effective and efficient service for the public of Northamptonshire. And that's very much what the vision and ethos for enabling services that I've laid out in the paper for you, so I won't go into in huge detail, was about. It was not about being the cheapest. It's about delivering a better quality, value for money service within the county. 90+% of the people who work in enabling services live in the county as well. for the people of the county to deliver to the front lines to ultimately make people in the wider community safer. The paper outlines the various functions. There'll be no major surprises in there in terms of what the enabling services functions cover. We're talking there around there being 32 million of budget of the over 200 million that there is between the two organisations' pots. That's not all staff, I hasten to add. There is, you'll be unsurprised to know that lots of that is the contracts that we hold for the various things that we have to do as organisations, whether that's cutting the grass, cleaning the windows, or any manner of other things that goes with things like keeping a fleet on the road or managing buildings. So a lot of the contract management bits of the organisation sits within that number. I've given a whole load of stats in the paper. I won't again read them again here now. I will just pick out a couple in there so that you will see there's over £500,000 a year brought in income generation. Two main routes for this. This is about us producing frameworks for getting supplies and services contracts for the benefit of Northamptonshire that we then sell on to other organisations. So an example of this, we lead nationally on the pensions framework for policing, and other forces pay into the management of our arrangements through that. The other side of that is we actually now get a fair deal for the first time ever, and again, the ex-police officers in the room will be aware, from places like Silverstone for F1, places like the football club, who require a policing service, but historically have got it for next to nothing or free in certain cases. We now charge them a fair amount of money for the services that they have on their private land. Some of the savings, a couple of savings that I didn't put in the paper, but thought it was worth putting in, and they sound boring, but organisations need these things, as you'll be aware. So things like, by doing things jointly, we've made over the lifetime of our contract, which is 3 years in this case, for Microsoft licensing, more than £100,000 of cost avoidance saving from the volume we're able to buy by coming together and doing it together. Similarly, over I think it's a 5-year in this case, we've just bought a system called an IT service management tool. Every IT service desk in the country needs such a thing. £300,000 in cost avoided by doing it jointly rather than doing it separately. I've outlined in the paper that most of the systems that underpin the enabling services now are joint. That means the processes are joint. That means we're able to flex the resource so that if somebody who normally works on fire stuff isn't there, someone from police can cover over and deal with it, or vice versa. Good time for my computer to decide to disappear. And it makes us more robust and resilient, I suppose, in its roundest sense. I won't say I've completely eliminated single points of failure, but there are far, far fewer than when they were two separate, distinct organisations, whether that is the single health and safety person that we had for policing. When that person left last year, we were able to move resource around to make sure we were still able to provide a service, as an example. And more recently still, again, on the theme of bringing things back into Northamptonshire, so that we have control. I should say we're all employed by Northants Police. Every single person in enabling services is employed by Northants Police, but effectively I'm the only one of them who has a dual reporting line. I report into both chief officers of the two organisations. Recent examples then, we've brought back occupational health from the region for policing. Again, police officers were having to travel into Leicester and beyond to get the services they need, to get them back on the streets. That's now all based within our county. And similarly for fire, they had a contract that meant at times they were having to travel up to Birmingham, only on certain days of the week as well. That's now in the county, 7 days a week. It is 7 days a week in this case as well. And we've saved on the costs of implementing new systems, etc., by having one, not two. And I mentioned earlier legal coming out of the region as well in the earlier item is another example of that. I will probably keep quiet there because I'm conscious of you overrunning slightly on your agenda and you will no doubt have some questions.
Thank you, Paul. I'll go around the room in a second. There was one point I think will probably get raised from all corners of the room, is that in light of the previous point about the end of the office of the Crime Commissioner in time, that how with the contracts, what's going to happen when they run? Do they run beyond the point of the tenure of the Commissioner, etc.? I'm sure that will be brought in, but rather than it go around the room and you hear it 10 times, I thought I'd raise that first, if I may.
Yeah, so collaboration, of course, isn't dependent on it being the same governance, so that, I suppose that's up for discussion. The arrangements we have in place at the moment are under a collaboration agreement for enabling services. That refers to the fire authority and the policing body, whoever that is. So clearly there's always the opportunity for whatever that successor bodies are to look at it and say, actually, I don't want to do this, or I want to do something different, or I want to add more in. But effectively, there's no kind of direct correlation between PCCs ending and this needing to automatically end. The contracts themselves will just novate over to, again, any successor bodies.
Perfect, thank you. Appreciate that. Councillor Keeble.
Can I just come in quickly on that?
Sorry, Johnny, yeah.
We're being good stewards, though, over the course of this next 2 and a bit year period. If we're entering into long-term or contentious pieces of work, we're thinking about that very carefully. So, for instance, there's a conversation about integrating website functions. Is that the right thing to do at this point, or should we be more cautious? So we're, as part of the transition arrangements, we're going to be working through a range of different contractual considerations. But Paul's principle is absolutely right. The functions transfer. The current delivery mechanism is clear. Is that the one for the future? Is there other all to play for? There's another piece here, though, which is national procurement reform. We've been promised a white paper from government before Christmas, which is now in the new year, which I think will have something to say on that, but I'm not anticipating total clarity on that point. I'm not sure if you are either, Paul.
No, and again, we're well placed nationally around all things procurement. So you may be aware there is a blue light commercial nationally who provide some level of procurement support, but their go-to for when they are looking for additional support is Northamptonshire. So a number of the national agreements that exist are owned and managed locally here anyway. So whatever comes out in that white paper would be building on the direction we've already taken locally.
Thank you both. Councillor Keeble, I'll allow Ms Woodhouse, because you've been out of the room, perhaps hear some more from the floor first, unless you want to go straight in.
I'm not sure. Maybe this point's been covered while I've been out of the room, but throughout the report, I noticed that there was a section where you said that you weren't able to say whether or not the enabling services was value for money in terms of the work that you're doing. So how then can you provide some assurance to the public that the money's been, the funding or the budgeted amount is being used wisely? Yeah, just keep it simple.
Thanks for that, Pauline. So as part of our external audit, as all local authorities do, we get a value for money assessment. And so our external auditors, Grant Thornton, have recently been doing that, and that, of course, includes in the policing world, it includes all of this enabling services stuff as well. And we're really pleased that the draft reports have given us a clean slate for value for money, and they've looked into all of these units, and we've got a couple of low-level recommendations, but nothing of any concern for that. So that gives me some assurance that enabling services, as well as the broader budgeting, is good value for money in the round.
Excellent, thank you. Can I have a follow-up question as well, please? In terms of enabling services, can you just highlight to the meeting, and again, I'm going to keep going back to this big conversation kind of thing, just talk to us about it in terms of what areas of excellence have you identified in terms of your work, and I mean it in the broadest terms, okay? That's one. Could you just share with us some of those areas of excellence that you've identified that is working really well? And the second part of the question is some of the challenges that still remains that needs to be looked at and tackled.
So, linking it to your point now around the big conversation, so some of the work that the Commissioner outlined in terms of the youth engagement work that has been going on is people within enabling services have been directly supporting that. So we have a cultural change team that is within enabling services. So they have been involved in any number of those consultations with the public, bringing that insight in. They've also done the staff surveys and are making sure we're delivering on those internally. I mention them in particular because I suppose they've also been integral to the cultural change we're driving in the fire and rescue service at the moment. So you will be aware 2-3 years ago now, HMIC FRS published a national report around cultures, behaviours in the fire and rescue sector nationally. And through the work of that team, we have moved from having effectively a cause for concern from HMIC in terms of our involvement around equality and diversity, and also wider cultural matters, disciplinaries, etc., to actually having all of that signed off, removed, with the exception of one area where they will re-examine in terms of the area for improvement at the next inspection. But huge progress around disciplinary cases, etc., within the fire and rescue service as a result of that team. So I highlight that as one example. There's many examples of good stuff in there. Challenges, I suppose one of the biggest challenges, and it's got harder over the 5 years I've been doing this role, is in recruiting into police officer roles. It's getting harder and harder to get the quality that we wanted to bring in. I think it's fair to say. The uplift of the previous government was welcome in many, many ways, and we got huge volumes coming in. That means we've got a very young in-service front line, and that then leads on to, again, for my worlds, how do we train those better? How do we adjust to a different generation who want different things in different ways? And more recently still, obviously, we don't apologise this for any shape or form, the more stringent checks we're taking around it, making sure we employ the right people into the organisation, means that actually we need even more volume at that front end to get a cohort out the other end. You know, even just in the last week, we've had around a third of a cohort, you know, at the very end, who aren't coming into the organisation because they did not pass vetting. And I don't apologise for that, because that's the right thing to do. But it means, I suppose, all of that time we've got that volume we need to bring in at the front end, and that is a challenge.
Okay, thank you for that, Paul. Just to focus on the fire service a bit, I know that there's some challenges there in terms of, I guess, new recruits and people who are already employed in the service, and people not moving on kind of, I guess, quick enough in terms of what's going on with the new recruits at the moment, and the fact that
So you're right, the turnover in the fire and rescue service is much lower than it is in Northampton Police. People and the volume's much lower as well, so actually the number that you can recruit on every year is much, much lower. You know, policing, we're talking into the hundreds each year are being recruited. Fire and rescue, it's somewhere between 6 and 18 each year. That's, you know, that's the volume of change. So if you're looking at it from a change perspective in terms of whole-time firefighters, that's the number. It's only in the last 3 or 4 months that the recruitment function for fire and rescues come into enabling services. So that involves it all coming into enabling services. That includes 2 firefighters are currently seconded into that team as well. They're now going to start looking at not just whole time, but also the retained firefighters, because that's been managed on station up until now. We're now going to have some more corporate oversight and input into that to try and make sure that we are recruiting from as diverse of our communities as we possibly can, but getting the right people in. At the same time, and looking at every stage of our process on that recruitment journey, because again, it's being reviewed at the moment to try and make sure that the tests we put in place really reflect what we want a firefighter to do, not just kind of slavishly following the process, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And my final question, if that's okay, Chair, is that throughout the report, you also said that, notice I'm not even looking at the report, I kind of remembered it off by heart, where you said that 5 years on, 80% of the fire service is being transferred across to enabling services work. What's the plan around the other 20%? Will that other 20% be transferred, or is it possible, is it not possible, and if not, why not, and how are we moving forward?
So I was just double checking, but the 80% referred to in the report is about 80% of the IT systems that Fire and Rescue Service had, we have replaced. That isn't they've all transferred over to enabling services. We've had the capacity in place. If I told you that IT function for Northampton Fire and Rescue Service was four and a half people when it moved out of the council, they did not have the capacity to change any of their systems. Their systems were old, antiquated, not serving them well. So the 80% is about we've changed 80% of the systems that they operate on a daily basis over those past 5 years. The remaining bits are in the plan for the next couple of years. So it was about the system rather than everything moving over to enabling, if that makes sense.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
All good. Conscious of time, and I think Ms Woodhouse, you probably raised a lot of points that the panel members would say, but Councillor Kibble, you okay? Councillor Butler? All good? Councillor Morris?
Very briefly, on the training piece, which I appreciate you're responsible for, or certainly the department is, I have to urge that when you look at that training, I'm sure you do all the time, and I'm sure the Commissioner's involved in guiding and advising, it's the ability for police officers to understand basic crime that really matters. A simple crime has a definition, as I touched on it earlier. I've met so many police officers over the last few years who don't even understand the basic definition of a criminal damage, let alone a burglary or a robbery or a theft. And that, to me, is a huge error on the part of whoever it is that's driving that training process. So I'll just urge you to try, and by whatever method you can. Certainly, I think the term is, what have we got here? A chief people officer, whoever that person is. I don't know who the individual is. Please encourage them to get their noses into that training, that initial training, and start having police officers arrive at your force, knowing what crime is and what the basic constituents are of a particular crime, and all the crimes that you're seeing in your stats, Commissioner. Those repeat crimes that happen every single day of the week. Most police officers don't understand the basics, and I really can't hammer that home enough. So please, if you could look at that for me going forward, I'd certainly be grateful. I know the public would be.
Yeah, so just on that then, you might be pleased to hear we've just completed a review of our whole training function, not just that initial recruit stuff, but the whole thing, from a former superintendent who those of you who are in policing will probably be aware of has helped us to do that, Dave Hill. Some of you will know the name. And he has helped us to review all of that, because actually what we've got into, I think, is a process of where we are. College of Policing set national standards of what we have to do in each of those, but we've got a bit, again, my slavish to process things. We've just delivered the what they've given us, rather than actually saying, how does this apply to Northamptonshire? How do we deliver better? How is it about understanding what you really need for the job on a day-to-day basis? So all of that work's ongoing at the moment to try and build on that review.
That's really reassuring. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Morris. Commissioner?
Could I just come in on that? The review is really, really important. The government is also, at the moment, putting together a performance framework. And we're watching that with great interest, because we don't want it to become, when I say we, I mean the commissioners, don't want it just to become targets because of what was said in an earlier conversation. So we're looking really closely at how that's going to impact us and our force. But, with all the issues that you've raised, Councillor Morris, there are system issues, there are training delivery issues, but there are also cultural issues. And one of the things that we talk about all the time, and we do training around all the time, is the importance of all police officers and police staff to recognise that they are public servants. And they have got to put customer service at the heart of everything they say and everything they do. Now, I know the teams who have incorporated that thinking into their daily practice. Actually, the university teams is one of them. But, you know, it is work in progress, and it's something, again, you know, that we hold the line on. That is what police officers are there to do. They're there to service the public, and they need to be responsive to that.
Thank you. Councillor Lister, you're okay. Councillor Towns? Mr. Frost.
Yeah, it's not a question. It's just I'd like to say, having with you, Paul, 12 years ago, started the business case, saw the opportunity of this. I just want to say a massive congratulations for where you've got this, because this is unique in the country. We are the leaders in this county in this area of work, and that's down to the hard work of all the team that's been behind it, because it is a really difficult, tricky road, and you've achieved some amazing things, so well done.
Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, Mr. Frost. Councillor MacDonald. Councillor Kellett. Thank you. Andy. Dr. Coos. Okay. Anybody else want to go back over? Miss Woodhouse? Again.
Sorry. This is for the Commissioner, actually. The police force in Northamptonshire was not funded fairly, or has not been funded fairly. And when you came into office, you said that you would continue to kind of lobby and raise conversations about that in terms of improving that. Could you just talk to us as to where you're at with that piece of work? And
well, it's part of a national conversation, so it's something that is raised every time commissioners meet with the Home Office, and they do know that we're all really anxious about it. The sticking point is the big forces. You know, the government is really concerned, all governments have been, not to damage the bigger forces, and that is part of the problem, that until they get their heads round how to maintain the integrity of forces like the Met, then we're kind of left running behind in a way. But everybody's aware of the problem, and we are hoping, as life rolls through, that we will get better settlements. I'm really pleased that this year we had a doubling of the neighbourhood policing grant, actually. That's made a huge difference to us.
Thank you, Commissioner. All good? Okay. I think we're reaching the end of the item. It's basically to note the report, but I'd take Mr. Frost's point. I think, you know, to have Northamptonshire and the two councils that work under this, it's worth noting the progress, and in fact we are leaders in our fields, and so congratulations to all those who have done the work, and thank you for bringing it to us today. If we may, panel, we'll move on. And that brings us to point 9 on today's agenda, the Fire and Rescue Authority Finance Update. Over to Vaughan.
Thank you.
To introduce the report. Thank you.
Again, I won't go into an awful lot of detail. I expect most of it as read. The figures within here are taken at the 6-month point, so we felt it was useful for you to get a kind of halfway through the year. This is where we are with the budgets. The fire service are showing an overspend position at the moment. We're expecting that to be pulled back by the end of the year, but this is at that point we are expecting the fire service to overspend by around £443,000. As we alluded to earlier, the vast majority of that is due to it's almost a bittersweet thing, really. The firefighters want to stay in their jobs. They want to keep on in their jobs. They don't want to retire. Therefore, we have to keep paying them, and we love everything they bring to the service. But unfortunately, for budgets, we expect more people to leave. So that's largely what that is. But what the Enabling Services team does is keep a regular look at that to make sure that recruitment profiles are adjusted accordingly, so we don't end up with even more people that we technically can't afford. So that is something that's being looked at. Just to draw you to the reserves position, so as we've mentioned before, when governance transferred for the fire service, there were no reserves at all. So in coming into the Commissioner's office, one of the main priorities was to build up a reserves position in fire, which we have done. We're not expecting to use very much more reserves than we'd planned to. So we still are expecting almost £4 million in the pot by the end of the year, which is reasonably healthy. It's still one of the lowest in the country, but it does give us what we need for some assurance. I invite any questions.
Thank you, Vaughan. Carolyn first.
Hi, thanks, Vaughan. So reading this report, just a couple of things. So 3.3 talks about pay awards given across the sector are higher than budgeted with no additional government funding made available. So, and then the next, I think further down, if I look further down, underspends are expected in the enabling services. My question is so we've made a decision to pay awards and we haven't got the money. So are we reliant then on the enabling services underspending or increasing their sort of income through their commercial bit, because they talked in the last report about an income, to offset this? Because I'm a bit confused why we would, or is that just what we've always agreed? And did we do this last year as well? Was the sort of last year we kind of gave awards and it was higher than budgeted with no additional government funding? I'm just trying to understand that. It just seems a bit odd.
So there's an important difference between police and fire in this respect. So in the fire sector, the pay awards referred to here are about the firefighters predominantly, and they received a pay award of 3.2%. We still don't have a decision on what we call the Gold Book firefighters, so that's the senior leadership team, so we don't know what their pay award will be. No additional government funding is given to the fire sector for that. In policing, and it is police that employ the enabling services staff, police staff received a slightly different pay award, but there was additional grant provided to policing. So the challenge is how much of that additional funding that's gone into police do then pass on to fire. And so what the finance team tries to do is to make that as fair as possible, so that what fire pay for is good value for fire.
I think as well, just to help on that one then, both firefighter, police staff and police officer pay are national, so it's not a local choice. We are having what the national negotiation mechanisms gives us.
I understand that, but I think that I've raised this before. I think Vaughan last year didn't know about the facts about government funding and the concern about lack of government funding and the impact that it does have. So I can see what you're trying to do and juggle it. The way that it reads, I guess. And if I was as a member of the public out there, it just reads. It might be misinterpreted as a bit odd. That's all I'm saying to you. But thank you for the explanation.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Councillor Keeble.
Yes, I've got one. It's actually the same question I'd have for the police, so I don't know if they want to answer both at the same time or deal with it. It's really that the police also are projecting a small overspend, not a huge one, which is due to the similar pressures, staffing and overtime budgets, and also increase in demand, particularly around protection of people and the safeguarding issues. I just wondered they're small compared with what the council's looking at, but I wondered if you'd thought about when you might put any measures in place to claw back if they don't, if they're not managed down during the next half of the year.
So at present, the Commissioner isn't minded to claw that money back out of next year's budget, because we all appreciate the pressures that both fire and policing will be under next year as well. And there's also an appreciation that a lot of the overspends are somewhat out of the service's control. So if for example, overspends were caused by lack of governance or by spending outside of the budget envelope or against the plan, then obviously the Commissioner would look to claw that back because it wouldn't be appropriate. But we're relatively happy that these are things that could be clawed back, and as you say, the amounts are reasonably small. But if some of these things aren't addressed, then the Commissioner would be looking at seeing what should rightly be drawn back.
Can I just, yeah. I just didn't hear the beginning of your answer. Did you say that you were looking to roll them forward to next year, or were you said you were looking to claw them back?
No,
the end of
sorry,
the year?
sorry if I wasn't clear.
I just didn't hear it.
No, that's okay. That's me mumbling. No, we wouldn't. What we would do at the end of this year, we would withdraw that from reserves if there is still an overspend position, and then we'd start afresh from next year. That's the current plan. We obviously have options to do otherwise, but that's not currently in the thinking.
Thanks, Councillor Keeble. Councillor Butler? Councillor Morris? Councillor Lister?
I think our fire reserves are critical or very low, or some of the lowest nationally. What point are we going to get to with reserves for overspending on certain things that we're going to get to that cliff edge of criticality in terms of those reserves, and what's the plan around those?
So what we've said in our reserve strategy for a couple of years now is, now that we've built reserves to a level that is less scary, to use a turn of phrase, we want to not... Any reserves that we use, we want to put back in. So when we set next year's budget, we would be looking at if there is any options to make savings and put those back into reserves to build them up. As part of the fire reserves, £2 million of that is what we call the general reserve, and that is the bare minimum that we feel we should have, the £2 million, and we wouldn't accept going below that. If it looked like we were going to go below that, we'd have to take some urgent action. So given that we're almost double that, we feel it's relatively comfortable. But I agree with your point. We need to, if we draw from reserves, we need to make a plan to put it back in.
Thank you all. Councillor Towns?
May I have
sorry.
Would that be all right?
Yes, indeed. Go on.
There was also that question then on the number of the firefighters. So we've got we've got more retained more firefighters now because of the pension age, and they're not staying on long enough. And then we've also got more on-call firefighters, which is good. Have we done any modelling on when we think those are going to fall out and the further impact on the workforce that we're going to see? And do we think that model is still fit for purpose for fire in Northamptonshire?
So the part of that is being worked out by the Enabling Services team. Well, it's all being worked out by the Enabling Services team. But as Paul mentioned earlier, it's only recently that Enabling Services took on workforce planning for the fire service. And I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, but a brief answer for me would be yes, there is a plan to look at all of this, and at a senior level as well, as part of the strategic planning of the fire service.
So I suppose 2 points to help with it. So we have a workforce planning group that looks at when we anticipate people are likely to retire, and so plans for when we do recruitment. Again, we are anticipating more staying than we thought next year, so that's a good thing. But also, as a service, we are looking to look at all of the demand, all of the risk that is within our county, and actually have we got the right resources in the right places. So there's a whole, if you like, an operating model piece of work that is underway at the moment. The demand work, the analytical work that backs all of that up is kicking off next week. And therefore, during 2026, getting the right year, we will be able to then look at actually, are all the stations in the right places? Do they have the right mix of whole time retained? Should some be 24/7? Should some be 7 days a week? You know, what is the right mix for the county? So all of that work's ongoing, which will help us as well to make sure we've got the right people in the right places.
Thank you, Councillor Lister. Councillor Towns? Mr Frost. Councillor MacDonald.
I'd just like to commend the Fire Chief for increasing the numbers of those part-time fire officers, especially in our rural communities where they're a godsend to us all. In fact, I spoke to some in Oundle only the other week doing a training event, and it's quite worrying the things that they have to deal with, especially lithium fires. I know that's going to bring extensive challenges to the fire service across the country, which undoubtedly is going to incur further cost. But I do know that they're on top of that. So thank you ever so much.
Councillor Kellett.
Just going back onto the reserves, could you see in the future where the reserve could be dropped under the 2 million, where you would be comfortable, or would it never be comfortable under the 2 million?
I would never be comfortable with it being under the 2 million. 1.9, no. No, I'd see it. We always test the level of the general reserve against the overall budget envelope. So I could only ever see that going up, because we need to make sure that the general reserve is at the very least a certain percentage of what our overall budget is, because obviously it needs to be looked at in light of inflation.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Sims, all good? Okay, anybody else want anything around the room? Yeah, Councillor King.
Just come back. It's a point that you said that if you draw on reserves, then you'd look to build up the reserves as well next year. If you've got a base budget that's built on demand and employee numbers, and particularly when it's demand-driven, which is what the council's seen all its budget problems with, could you just say what your thinking is about then how you manage to deal with the base budget, the over-demand base budget, and also pay back the reserves? Because that's quite a difficult bit to fill.
It is difficult. Essentially, we'd be building the budget based on demand and risk, and then any payment into reserves would have to be built on top of that. So we need to ask for more budget for that, or ask the service to make savings. There's no other way of getting that. There's nowhere else.
To be able to pay back into the reserves.
Yeah.
So then that's a precept going up.
Potentially.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you, everybody. So on that basis, James, do you have anything to add from the summary there? Would you come in?
I don't think so, Chair. I think unless panel says otherwise, it's simply a case of noting the report.
In which case, everyone happy to note the report,
Yes.
unless detailed otherwise. Thank you. And we move straight on to point number 10, today's agenda, the police finance update. Back to Vaughan to introduce that, and I'm sure it's along similar lines.
Thank you. I don't want to just repeat myself. It's very, very similar position. A slight overspend in policing. Obviously, it's a bigger budget to begin with, so even though the overspend is not dissimilar to the fire one, it is actually a much smaller percentage variance to the overall budget, so it's not something that concerns us too much. Obviously, the main reasons for that are things like overtime. That is an age-old problem for police forces to try and meet demand with the overtime. But we always address that with the chief, and he is very alive to it and trying to drive that down. The reserves position in policing is more healthy. It's more average across the sector, and we are planning to maintain it or use what we've allocated to use, so our predictions are still broadly in line with what we put forward a year ago. Inviting questions.
Thank you, Vaughan. Round the room, Councillor, keep your mics on, but Dr. Coos.
Vaughan, it's just, I know I ask this every year, but it's just about the grant-funded stuff that I get worried about. So I know that you try and budget that in, but I know there's a lot of good programmes that happen. I mean, the payback scheme, et cetera, that goes on, but a lot of that is reliant on grant funding, isn't it, coming through? So the confidence, really, you've got of funds coming through again without putting the precepts up too much would be helpful. Thank you.
As you know, there are lots of different grants that we get for lots of different things. Some of them are very specific and some of them are more general. Just for information, you may have seen it in the news, we got notification earlier in the week about the victims, witnesses and domestic abuse and serious sexual violence grants, and that they have gone up by 2%. So we will be for 3 years. So far, we've been given the figures for 2 years, so we've got some certainty around that, which is really reassuring, and that'll enable us to maintain the level of staff and activity in those areas. In terms of the more general policing grants, all of our estimates are based on what is coming out of government, what is coming out of the spending review, and we use a national technical team that works across police forces and commissioners' offices to kind of number crunch that to make sure that we're consistent across the country with our assumptions. So we've got those in at the moment. We won't have. We're being told we won't have the police settlement, which will include the information around the precept referendum limit, until the middle of December. We're told around about the 17th of December. So that will be a nice Christmas gift to all of us. But until then, we have to go with the assumptions that we're aware of and build in and take some and highlight those risks.
Thank you, Vaughan. Ms Woodhouse? No. Councillor Keeble? Okay. Councillor Butler? Councillor Morris? Councillor Lister? Councillor Towns?
Yes, on 5.5, there's financial pressures indicated due to the change of numbers of officers seconded to regional units. Can you explain that for me, please?
So as part of the budget, you'll see on one of the budget lines we have collaborations across the East Midlands and nationally. Most of that is within the East Midlands. That is for activities, the biggest chunk of that is around special operations, which is to do with serious organised crime and counter-terrorism. So counter-terrorism is budgeted nationally now, and the serious and organised crime teams are within a regional arrangement, so expertise is shared across the 5 East Midlands forces. The way that works is that every police force gives a number of officers into that unit on a secondment basis, so that there's representation from every police force in that area, and it depends who successfully gets those jobs. And all it takes is a change of say, a superintendent or one of the more senior members of staff being seconded to that unit means that we then, and it's similar to the fire comment, it's a bittersweet thing because it means you get more officers back into your local policing area because you've not seconded them out. But when you second them out, the money goes into the regional unit. The money comes from the regional unit for them. So it's a reduction in income. Overall, it kind of balances itself out because everybody has their fair share of what they put into these regional units. But it causes short-term variances, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you. It does.
Sorry, I garbled it a little bit.
Thank you very much. No. Councillor Kellett? No, you're in?
Yeah, just a quick one. Staff vacancies are being filled quicker. On what sort of percentage are they being filled quicker?
I'm not sure if I can give you that in terms of percentages, but one of the big reasons for that is the time it takes for vetting to go through. So we've recently invested, in the last year or so, a couple of times actually, into the vetting department, as I'm sure you'll be aware, to make sure that the vetting is done in a timely way, because it's only the length of time to do vetting only increases with the amount of assurance you want, and obviously we're doing it to the highest standard as we absolutely should be. So there's more staff in the vetting team. There was a point in time where vetting was taking in excess of 12 weeks, and vetting can only complete after you've gone through the recruitment process and interviewed and got the person in, and then the person won't be willing to hand in their notice in their old job until the vetting's gone through. So it can take months and months for just to appoint quite a straightforward post into policing. So that vetting has really brought that down.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Sims? No. Oh, good. Dr. Goose? Okay. I have nothing else to add to that. I think thank you again for the input. This again is the same as the last item. It's a report to note and notes in the minutes and the feedback from the panel. So if everyone's happy, we'll note that item and move on. Johnny, come in.
I think this is where you lose us. But I wondered if you wanted some clarity on the 20% figure that was used in relation to violence against women. So the figure that the Commissioner used is essentially a category of crime that includes domestic abuse as the broadest part of that, but also stalking and harassment, rape and other sexual offences. And that is 20% of overall police demand of overall crime as well. So that's that number specifically. As you rightly said, you know, general violence or street violence and what have you would affect, would tip towards male victims. But on those statistics, that 20% group, it's essentially over 70% of victims are female of domestic abuse, and offender profile is thick end of 75% as well. So that was the category of offences that the Commissioner was referring to. But as I say, I'm happy to get any further detail that would be useful to the panel on the crime picture. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just we'll ask, because we didn't have any of the business items, but while we've got you, we won't be seeing you for a few months. Is there any other points to raise with the Commissioner in her office before they go? Marvellous.
I thought you were going to wish us a Merry Christmas.
You can put your microphones on if you want to do that all. Yeah, but thank you very much. And
Merry Christmas.
Season's greetings to your office from ours. Okay, thanks everybody. And we will move on to item number 11, the last item on the agenda today, which is the work programme update. And I will hand over to James. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So this is the standard report that comes to each meeting of the panel to enable it to take an overview of its work programme, the things it's required to do, the things it's chosen to do, with a view to ensuring that that is always focused on, well, doing the things you're required to do and otherwise enabling you to direct your collective capacity and resources towards those things that make the most difference. So the latest version of the work programme is at the first appendix to the report. There will be additional topics to add to that as a result of your resolutions earlier in today's meeting. I think the thing to highlight at this point is that the next panel meeting on the 4th of February 2026 is the big one. It's the one where the panel gets to scrutinise the Commissioner's proposed precepts for policing and fire and rescue. So that's arguably the single most important statutory function that the panel has. Otherwise, highlight that there is an addition to this work programme report, which again will be a regular feature, which is the second appendix at page 67, which implements the panel's resolution about wanting to give a bit more focus to the responses to resolutions from its previous meetings where action is called for. So this, as I say, will be a feature of the work programme report from now onwards. There isn't a vast amount in it at this stage because there was only the one resolution from the one last meeting which is relevant, and that's been implemented. So, as I say, Chair, the latest example of a regular report. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Keeble? Any order you like?
Thank you. There's 2 points which, I mean, I certainly think should be added. One is a point earlier on about the forward planning for what happens. And I think, having heard the discussion, I actually think that that's more important than ever, because when I talked about the rapidly changing local government environment, what I meant is elections next year. And obviously that, you know, depending on that, that might well change the discussions that there are about alliances and about our ability to go in with the different strategic partnerships. So, I think it's really important that we are well prepared to look at all the different scenarios. And that involves not just, I mean, I take the point about the staffing, that the staffing will remain, the functions will remain, but there is an issue about the accountability and the governance, and that is really important, because if we go into a bigger structure, we still have to make sure that we are proper, that we reflect our local communities, and the kind of points that Pauline Woodhouse brought up are particularly important. So I think that needs scoping out, and we need to track it through really carefully. Personally, I also think there's probably an opportunity for some sort of cleverer joined up working, like with some of the joint areas with local authorities and housing and stuff like that, and it might be possible to look at how that's scoped out, and youth work. Second thing is that what I don't see here is a point about the drug-related crimes, which I know caused so much contentious discussion in one of the previous meetings. Now, you know, I've had quite a lot of thought and quite a lot of discussions with various people about that, and I'm absolutely convinced that we as a panel have got a role, because if you look at, I mean, I obviously know Northampton the best. If we look at Northampton, in the centre of the town, which is in major need of regeneration, that we need to make sure that that because there's that crime issue there, that is bottomed out. And therefore, it's important that we're able to ensure, even if the crimes can't be measured in a tick box kind of way, the way some of the other crimes are, but that we ask what kind of, if you like, intelligent policing is going on, not just what gets measured gets done, and that we actually hold the police to account about how, hold the Commission to account for how she's holding the police to account about how that's dealt with, if needs be then also, since some of us do have 2 hats, some of us have 3 hats, that we're able to pursue those down other areas. Now, I don't see that, unless I'm not reading it properly, I don't see that closely reflected in the work, in this work plan in front of us. And I do actually think it needs to be, because I think if we don't deal with the things which are of concern to the public and they don't see us talking about things that resonate with them, then I think it does ask, you know, there's some questions around it. And linked with that, I'd also put in the points about, because the wider issue around drug-related activity also surrounds people who are extremely vulnerable and then who get preyed upon by drug dealers. And I've certainly, I mean, I think all of us have probably had cases of that. So I would argue that we need to deal with that seriously, albeit I completely understand that issue about you can't, you know, on a tick boxy kind of way record all the crimes. So that's my bit. And it may be that James has already got it in the work plan, but I don't see it reflected there.
Thanks, Councillor Keeble. James?
Through you, Chair. So, on the one hand, yeah, it is intended to be in there, but on the other hand, you could be forgiven for not appreciating that. So if I could highlight page 65, top of the... page 65.
Response to serious antisocial...
Yes, so...
That is drug-related crime, is it?
That was intended to pick up the discussion, I think it was at the previous meeting, which included drug-related crime. I accept it could be a bit more specific than it is.
Sorry. I know everybody's, you know, wants to go home and everything, but I do think that this needs to be very explicitly spelt out, because antisocial behaviour, I think, can be recorded, can't it? Drug-related crime can't be. Antisocial behaviour is, of course, an issue. It's also an issue, like for housing officers and neighbourhood wardens and so on to deal with. The drug-related crime is, I think, on a different level, actually, and I think it's really important that it's really seriously looked at. It has huge impacts for the individuals. It has this sort of like network effect into all kinds of other related areas, you know, cuckooing, manipulation of women in particular, sex working, all kinds of other things. And it also actually has a huge impact on the reputation of Northampton and the regeneration plans for the middle of the town. So I think we need to really call it for what it is. I do welcome James's words to try to appease me, though.
Sorry, through you, Chair. Can I just also seek some clarification, further detail of what Councillor Keeble, what other members mean when they're talking about drug-related crime? It sounds as if what you're talking about is crime associated with organised drug dealing. Would that be fair to say?
I could probably go on at great length. It might be that Dr. Kuss has got more pithy words as to what it would mean. I would think it means knife crime where drugs are a factor. I would have thought it also means drug dealing. I would also have thought it means cuckoo. I'm not sure that's a crime, but it would probably mean that. but it would mean a range of crimes in which drugs are a factor. But I completely understand the point that it's not a neat category. But if you look at the more sort of intelligent policing, then it would be relevant. But I'm sure Dr. Kuss is much better on this than me.
I think I know what you're trying to say. So obviously we have got serious issues across and it's everywhere in terms of drug use and abuse and drug abusers and what's happening. And there's two different categories really. There's those that actually take drugs and need to feed that habit and how they do that, and there's those that bring the drugs in. And there is a real issue around, it's a growing issue, James, around cuckooing, where they're actually going into people's own homes and taking those over and using those as basis to actually get drugs out into the community. So there is something about that. I don't know, let's think about the wording how we do that, but there's something about that we need to probably think about. It does have an impact. It has an impact on people's lives, and it's a tragic impact, and you'll find people end up homeless and various other things through that.
Through you, Chair, I certainly wasn't seeking to denigrate the impact of this in any way. What I was trying to highlight was the broader you set the scope for this, the more you're seeking to scrutinise. And yeah, it could be done in stages. It's just important to be clear about get a clear understanding of what members were seeking to look at on this.
Councillor Towns?
Yes, thank you. When you talk about drugs, are we talking about illegal drugs or general substance abuse? I would tend to include alcohol in that, as it does have many of the same antisocial behaviours, I feel.
I mean, I think if you include alcohol in it, I think that might be taking it too far, because there are specific, I mean, there's a lot of issues around overuse of alcohol, and there's issues about, pricing and costings and management of it and so on. But I think the use of drugs, illegal drugs, would probably be best dealt with as a separate subset, I would have thought, or a particular phenomenon, if people would agree with that. I mean, particularly because of some of the realities that we see playing out in the lives of the communities. And I think what we'd be looking for in terms of what we might be asking the Commissioner for to be following up with the Chief Constable would be around the steps that they're taking to capture the data and the harms that are occurring out there in the community as a result of the of drug-related crimes, and then how they're proposing to intervene to deal with that, which may also involve some partnership working with the council. But that's what we'd be looking for. Yeah. Is that right?
So I think, James, just to get it wrong, I think what you're talking about then is the police will capture data of people that have been arrested or other things during, and some of that will be drug-related crime, and it's those statistics that if we ask the Commissioner if they've got them to bring and to look at what they are doing and what prevention methods they're putting in place, how they're working with communities and the difference that's making in terms of outcomes. Does that make that easier, or James? So we're capturing the performance data around drug-related crimes. Yeah?
Yes, I'm just thinking also when you remarked about the cuckooing and so on, was also a recent case that was reported where a young, or not such a young person, died after having been drawn into a group, and her death was due to an overdose of drugs. The crime was probably that she was sold drugs and was watched taking them when she was already close to the edge and was not, and that was then neglected, but there wasn't actually a crime recorded. But it's a drug-related death, unexplained death, I suppose.
Councillor Morris, raised your hand.
Yeah, I was just sort of thinking how we could define what it is we're trying to achieve. It's, I suppose, some sort of work plan for us to focus upon going forwards. And I think if we had a definition of that focus, something like, I don't know, criminal offences that cross over into the Misuse of Drugs Act, that involve or are connected to the manufacture or supply or the possession with intent to supply of drugs, any violence that is associated directly with drugs and the misuse of drugs under the Act, the 1974 Act. Something, you know, that we perhaps could define very easily with a sentence that basically says if a Class A drug, particularly a Class A drug, I know we mentioned alcohol earlier, was involved with any of those things, I think what Councillor Keeble, the point she makes is really, really valid, because it does, as we all know, drugs create crime, which creates drugs, which creates crime. The Batara's box of criminality, I suppose, what goes around comes around. So I think if we could define it clearly, I think that would be very, very helpful. And I'm more than happy, having been on the drug squad, amongst other things, to help with that and make it very succinct and something that we could perhaps all agree would be the focus point of drug-related criminality. Just a thought.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. Noted. Councillor Keeble, back to James.
Thank you, Chair. Just a suggestion. I think we've got a sense of what members want to achieve, whether we have a further conversation with the Commissioner's office to try and bridge any gaps involved and come up with a clear understanding.
Councillor MacDonald, then.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Basically piggybacking on to Craig's comment, I think basically, and if I understand Councillor Keeble's, what she's trying to say, it's basically the impact of street dealing of controlled drunks in our communities. So can the Commissioner hold the Chief Officer of Police to account as what are he and his people doing to reduce it and make the lives of our community safer? Because otherwise, I think with this, it's like Craig. I've spent many years running drug teams, and it really is Pandora's box. There is no simple answer, and we run the risk of it extending and extending, so that the entire workforce of Northamptonshire Police is providing us data rather than going out and doing the necessary. That's just my thoughts.
Thanks, Councillor MacDonald. Noted. Any other points?
Yes.
Caroline?
I think a really key thing we need to add to this work programme is, following from our extraordinary meeting, the investigation that's going to be held by the Commissioner. We asked for and to see the scope and the specification of the review. I know it's not done yet, but I think it's important. It probably sits under the another box under the responses to resolutions, I guess, James, because that is key, and we need to make sure that that information comes to us as we've requested. It's really important. We're being watched by the public. There's lots of noise out there from the last meeting. People were very happy, I think, with the panel, but we need to keep our foot on the gas, would be my view on this one.
Yeah, through you, Chair. The only reason that isn't in the second appendix is because the second appendix for this meeting was published before the meeting on the 27th of November. It absolutely would and should be in there on its own merits, leaving the timing aside. And yeah, I did highlight to the Commissioner's office ahead of this meeting that the panel at the extraordinary meeting had reached that resolution. The Commissioner seemed happy with it, and so having asked to receive the information and have the opportunity to input in the scope, that now needed to be followed through on.
Thanks, James. I know you do. I know you do have a plan. And I think it's also, can we build in some time when it comes in to actually read it and spend some time debating it as a panel? And it's not another extraordinary meeting, but somehow build in that time. Is that all right? Thank you. Christmas Day.
Thank you, Caroline. And to note, you beat me to the same point. The only thing off the plan was the outcome of last week's meeting. But has anybody else got anything else to add? I think Pauline, I beg your pardon, you did raise before.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to back up the point that Councillor Keeble has raised about making sure that when it comes to that transitional stage, that the local forces are fit for purpose in terms of the end product that's been handed over. And I think for us to do that is not necessarily to spend, we did spend a huge amount of time today in today's meeting kind of talking about that, but I think it's maybe to have some kind of timeline planned in as to when we will start looking at that work as a panel, rather than in order to make sure that we focus on what we need to get done at the meetings, if that makes sense. Am I making sense? Yeah. So that's one point. The second point is I am glad that we're setting our own agenda in terms of what we want to see in our work plan as panel members, rather than being led in what we're supposed to be looking at, because I think, having been around Northampton for so long, I used to see stats where you had a breakdown of how many burglaries happened this month, how many drug-related offence, how many whatever. And I think when we look at the changes that have been happening over the years, less and less stats, less and less breakdown of what's going on in the town, is you're unable to identify, okay? And simply by saying someone's happy doesn't mean anything, because the very reason and the very things that we're supposed to be supporting as critical friends to develop and make sure that the public is getting, I guess, money's worth, yeah, and they feel safe and sound. Some of those things are directly affecting residents, and we're missing the point because we're not seeing the stats behind it, if that makes sense. Am I making sense? So you've got protect and serve, and then you've got the people who are supposed to be served, but at the same time, they're always at the bottom end of whatever is going on, and lots of vulnerable people are suffering in the background that nobody knows about, or they haven't got a voice. So I think it's really important that the way we've looked at how we want this piece of work to scope, I think it makes absolute sense that we really start looking at that, because it's not just the town centre. It's the very university campuses, it's the wherever you are in Northamptonshire, whether you're rural or central, it's affecting everyone. And so, yeah, I do feel passionate about things being just called out for what it is, rather than just words.
James? Yeah, so there seems to be a consensus, but just to be clear, is there a consensus that police governance reform, the impact of that and how the transition is managed is definitely something that the panel wants in its work programme?
Yep.
Yes. Please, thank you.
Okay. I think we've reached the end of that item in that case, and all points noted for the minutes. We'll move on to item 12, which is the urgent business, and none has been raised, no urgent business raised in advance of the meeting, so nothing to declare. And item 13 is the date of the next panel meeting, be the 4th of February 2026, 1 Angel Square. I believe the time will be 12:30 as today. And that brings the meeting to a close. Thank you everyone for your attendance and support.
Thank you. Thank you.